Welcome back, friends. Welcome to Openstack training brought to you by theskillpedia.com, a platform for online learning and online teaching. My name is Ram. This demonstration is about NOVA, OpenStack NOVA Compute Service. In order to start the session, we need to first understand what we have already, the existing setup. Let's verify first what we have. We are working on CentOS 8 and existing services. What I have already configured, we have configured MariaDB database on controller node, RabbitMQ, Rabbit message queue, etcd, memcache, and crony NTP network time protocol is already configured on controller node. We already installed and configured the identity service, that is OpenStack identity service keystone, and we already configured glance image service. So to check that, we can use source admin openrc and OpenStack service list, what all services are running. So keystone and glance, two services are already configured. Keystone is identity service and glance is image service. We have configured these two services, and this session is about OpenStack NOVA Compute Service. We are running on CentOS 8 updated. Now first step is we are going to create we are going to create the database. So for that, we are logging into MySQL. Now once you're logged in, let's create some databases. For this service, NOVA Compute Service, we require multiple databases. Like one is NOVA database, second we'll create NOVA API database, third database will be NOVA cell database, and fourth database will be separate database for placement, that is placement database. So we created four databases: placement, NOVA cell, API, and NOVA. Now we need to grant privileges. We need to create users with appropriate privileges. Grant all privileges on NOVA API to NOVA at localhost identified by NOVA. Password, NOVA DB password. This is for NOVA API. So for that we also use a wildcard, same detail but with wildcard, which means the user should be able to connect from anywhere. So this is for one database, NOVA API. Now this is for NOVA, same concept. We are keeping the same password so that we remember it. So this is for NOVA password, user created twice, one with from localhost to allow connectivity from localhost, and another with wildcard. And then for NOVA cell 0 database also, same user. And lastly with placement, for placement, privileges on placement dot star to placement at localhost identified by placement db pass. We're keeping simple passwords so that we remember. So all databases created with appropriate users also created. Now we can do flush privileges and exit from here. Once we are done at, then let's create the user, NOVA user. And to create the NOVA user, our command for this is NOVA user create, domain is default, project is service, and password is NOVA pass, and the username is NOVA. And then we need to give admin role to this user NOVA. Once the user is created, now user is created, let's add this user to admin role. So OpenStack role add project service, user is NOVA to the role admin. This is the syntax for adding a user to a role. And now similarly we create placement user also, and we'll add that user also to admin role. So now we are creating placement user, and we will add this user also to admin role. So placement user also created. Let's add this user placement to admin role. User is created, added to admin role. Now we'll create service. OpenStack service create Nova. OpenStack service create hyphen name Nova description the Skillpedia OpenStack compute service, and the service name is compute. Similarly, we create placement service as well. So compute service created, now placement service, and after that we have to create endpoints. Now we have to create endpoints for Nova, 3 endpoints for Nova service, I mean compute service. So compute public endpoint, this is public endpoint. Similarly, we'll create internal endpoint. So public endpoint created. Now we create internal endpoint. This is compute internal. And third, we'll create admin endpoint, compute admin endpoints. We also need to create endpoints for our placement service. Same way, 3 endpoints for placement, region 1 placement, public endpoint, then placement internal endpoints, and lastly placement admin endpoints. So endpoints created. Now we can exit from here and install the packages. We need to work as root user and install some packages. So let me verify the repository and then issue this command. Enable repository CentOS OpenStack Usuri Power Tools, and then install OpenStack Nova and OpenStack Placement API. So this is installing the packages. Now let's edit the main configuration file, which is etc nova.conf. In this file we have to make some entries in the default section first. So let's add it into the default section. IP 10.0.0.11, this is the IP address of current system where I am working on the controller node. A state path, enabled API, log directory, transport URL, use Neutron, firewall driver. These sections. After that we need to go to the API section. This is API. Under API we have to check the keystone auth strategy keystone, that should be there, and we should uncomment this line. It is already there, auth strategy keystone. Then we need to go to the API database section. API database section, and in database section we have to set the database connectivity, the connection string for our database which we created, Nova API database. This is API database, and then we also need to go to database section. In the database section we have to set our, this was API database, and now we have to set the Nova database connectivity, connection setting for Nova database. Then let's go and set the glance. This is glance section. Under glance section we have to tell the API servers, and our API server is controller :9292. This is for our glance setup. And then we need to go to the keystone auth token. Keystone underscore authentication. Under keystone authentication we need to set the parameters for our keystone identity service, like we specified in glance configuration file also. Authenticate URI, auth URL, memcache servers, auth type, project domain name, user domain name, project name, username Nova, right? And then under Oslo concurrency, let's go and set under Oslo underscore concurrency section. In this section we have to specify the log path, which is var lib nova temp. So let's uncomment this line. This is good enough for us. Where lib nova temp directory, and then we need to go to the placement section. Under placement, we have to specify the placement details, auth URL and the database, and the details for the service which we created for placement, username placement, placement pass, and the rest of the details for placement section. Then let's go to the scheduler. Under scheduler, we are setting the order for discovery, and that should be 300 seconds. So discover host in shell interval 300. After every 300 seconds, it is going to discover the nodes, compute nodes. Now VNC, under VNC section, we have to specify whether we allow VNC connection to our instances or not. So for that, we are setting this enabled is equal to true. Server listen my IP, the IP of this system, proxy client address, and then WSGI section. Under WSGI section, we need to specify the file name API paste config, API underscore paste underscore config, and this is a paste configuration file. These are all the details required for this our placement main configuration file for Nova service, Openstack Nova. And now we need to change the permissions, chmod 640 for our Nova compute service file, main configuration file. And this is changing the ownership. This file should be owned by Nova user. And then similarly, we are going to modify our placement configuration file. Let's configure the placement file, etc placement.conf. Under this, with debug is equal to false, then API, under API section, auth strategy keystone, which is already there. Let's uncomment the line, auth strategy keystone, and then placement database. Placement database, and the details connection settings for our database we created for this service, that was placement. This placement database, and then main database action, keystone authentication token, keystone underscore auth. In keystone auth, we need to specify the settings for our keystone authentication system, which we specified in glance, we specified in Nova. So the same details: authenticate URI, auth URL, memcache servers, auth type, project domain name, user domain name, and other things. So this is done with the placement configuration as well. So we specify the same thing here also, change the permissions and change the ownership for this file, placement configuration file. chmod 640 etc placement.conf, and then change the ownership, group ownership. Change group placement, and then change this file to be owned by placement. Oh, placement.conf. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to edit the file, which is a placement API configuration file. So vi placement API conf file. Under this file, we need to verify the settings for binary. Let me check that. Yes, that section is missing. basically that is for user bin. So we need to add a directory section which is missing from here under this section. So let's enter that section here, and that is for the user bin directory. So let's do proper alignment. If version is greater than 2.4, require all granted. If the version is less than 2.4, then this section is order. This is Apache configuration actually team. This is Apache configuration settings for our specifically for our placement. And then we are done with this part. We also need to verify if OpenStack SC Linux is installed. Then we need to install SC Linux, which is I think which is already there, which is already installed. I remember. Yeah, it is already installed. So, but yes, one thing for sure that we need to enable Boolean for port number 8778. HTTP port is 8778, and then we need to enable the firewall. This is because we have SC Linux as security enhanced Linux enabled. Now that's why we need to open this Boolean. We need to enable this Boolean. And the firewall for all the ports which we require for the service to allow connections. And now we are good to populate the databases. Let's populate the database. This is a placement manage DB sync. You need to populate all the databases. This is a Nova manage API DB. Then cell database. This is cell database. Manage database main Nova database, and finally we'll create shell. These warnings can be ignored because they are deprecated. Now this is a Nova manage shell database, create shell. Now we can restart our HTTPD service. Now this is what we have done. Now let's enable the services. API conductor scheduler, Novian proxy, good option that you can directly start with using for loop at the shell prompt for service in API, conductor, scheduler, and no VNC proxy. Enable -- now means start it now. Okay, now we can switch to stack user again and verify our services. Admin, source, admin OpenRC, OpenStack, service list. This will show all our services we created. Once we are done with this, we will configure our compute service which is running. So we have configured glance, we configured placement service and Nova compute service. Now let's go to the compute node. This is our compute node. We are configuring Nova compute service on compute node. So first thing first, we need to install the packages. -y install OpenStack Nova compute, OpenStack Nova SE Linux. DNF, I enable the repository directly and then install the package. So it seems unknown repository. Let's install the repository first. DNF -y install CentOS release OpenStack Usuri, and we need to enable it. So this repository installed, and now where that gone? Here it is. Now we need to enable it, and then let's update. Now let's install the package on this Nova compute and OpenStack SE Linux. Enable repo CentOS OpenStack Usuri and Power Tools, and then install OpenStack Nova Compute and other packages. It took nearly 10 minutes to install these 504 packages. It's almost done now. And let's edit the file nova.conf, the main configuration file for Nova Compute Service. Under default section, we need to specify the directory, log directory, like IP address, state path, then enabled APIs, OS API compute and metadata, log directory, and then transport URL, the firewall driver, the other details. Transport URL, use neutron true firewall driver. Now next is we go to the API section. Under API we need to specify auth strategy keystone. It is already there, so you just need to uncomment that line, auth strategy keystone. Then under glance section we need to go and check under glance, and here we have to check the API servers, and we need to specify the API server for glance, which is controller colon 9292 as we configured in glance service. Then keystone auth token, we need to go to keystone auth token section. So under keystone auth token section we have to make entries for the keystone specific details, as we have been doing for Nova on controller and placement, and then glance also the same details, exactly same details. Then we need to go to the libvirtd section. Under libvirtd section there is a option virt type. This is virt type. We need to uncomment this line, and instead of kvm we are going to use QEMU, quick emulator. That's the full form, QEMU type. And then under Oslo concurrency we need to uncomment this line lock path, var lib nova temp, and then we need to go to the placement section. Under placement section we need to put all the details for placement. So the details for placement are auth URL, region name, project domain name, auth type, all the details. Then we need to go to the VNC section. Under VNC section we need to enable this VNC, and we need to put the details, enabled true server listening on this. Alright, now WSGI section. Under WSGI we need to set the configuration file for WSGI. API paste config, and save the settings. Let me go through once more this file. Yeah, everything is fine. Save and quit, and now change the permission and the ownership. Permission and the ownership, this file should be owned by Nova user, and enable the boolean for set the right context on the port number 8778, and then we need to enable the firewall. Let's open the firewall ports. Also we need to open some other ports for firewall, and then we can reload the firewall. Reload to set all the rules. We need to enable the service and start it. So systemctl enable -- now Openstack Nova Compute, and we can check the status using systemctl status. The service is running. Now similarly we also need to enable libvirtd service, and we can start it, and we can check the status also. unable to open dev kvm, no such file or file, that is libvirtd. So we are not worried about our libvirtd much, because we are using QEMU emulator here, quick emulator. Now we need to go to the controller node again here. So switch to stack user. In fact, we need to continue login as a root user, and we need to discover the host which we have configured just now, which is compute. So to discover host, we have to use the nova manage salv to discover host. And after that, we can verify our discovered compute node on controller, switching to stack user and then verifying. Now let's go and check. Stack. Now source admin openrc, and then check the service. Openstack compute service list. Let's see. So we can see that compute on Nova compute on compute node is up and running. So good. Now we can also verify Nova catalog list. And this is our Nova catalog: compute service, identity service, image service, placement service. All these services are up and running. All right. So this is a Nova status upgrade check, and this returns success. So that means Nova upgrade checks results. All the results are a success. Therefore, we have successfully completed the installation of Nova on compute node and Nova services on controller node. That's all for this session. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.